At a bustling airport, where appearances can be deceiving, a seemingly ordinary woman steps into a world reserved for the elite. But when the staff at an exclusive VIP lounge decide she doesn't belong, they make the mistake of a lifetime. Want to know how one moment of prejudice sparked a jaw-dropping transformation? Stick around, because this story will leave you speechless. The airport hummed with its usual symphony of rolling suitcases, muffled announcements, and hurried footsteps. Natasha Bennett stood still amidst the chaos, a picture of calm confidence. Dressed in an impeccably tailored burgundy suit and matching heels, she exuded sophistication. Her black leather carry-on bag dangled lightly from her wrist, a perfect accessory to her understated gold jewelry. She took a deep breath, letting the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee from the nearby cafe wash over her. The VIP lounge entrance loomed ahead, its frosted glass doors bearing the airline's crest, a mark of exclusivity. Natasha adjusted her blazer and approached the sleek reception desk, where a woman in her mid-30s, with sharply arched eyebrows and a name tag that read Claire, stood. Claire looked up, her smile stiffening into something less welcoming. "Good morning," Natasha said, with a warm yet professional tone. "I'm here to check in for the VIP lounge." She slid her first-class ticket across the counter. Claire's gaze flicked down to the ticket, then back up to Natasha. There was a slight pause, long enough to sting, but short enough to pass as unintentional. "May I see your identification?" Claire's tone was clipped, her lips barely curving into a polite smile. Natasha complied without hesitation, pulling out her ID and placing it next to the ticket. Claire inspected the documents, her movements deliberate and slow, as though searching for a reason to deny her. Natasha noticed the faint curl of Claire's lip, a gesture that could be mistaken for concentration, but Natasha had seen it before. Claire looked back up and folded her arms. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a mistake." Natasha raised an eyebrow. "A mistake?" "This lounge is for VIP members and first-class passengers," Claire replied, her tone growing more condescending. "It's highly exclusive." Natasha's expression didn't falter, but she could feel the heat rise in her chest. She leaned forward slightly, her voice steady. "I believe my ticket and status qualify me for entry." "Could you clarify what you mean by a mistake?" Claire hesitated, her eyes flicking to the line of people forming behind Natasha. Several travelers, mostly dressed casually, whispered to one another as they glanced between Natasha and the attendant. Natasha could feel the weight of their stares, but she held her ground. "It's just unusual," Claire finally said, forcing a tight smile. "We don't usually see passengers like you in this lounge." Natasha's grip on her carry-on tightened, but her face remained calm. "Passengers like me," she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. Before Claire could respond, the frosted doors slid open, and a white couple walked in. The man wore a rumpled suit, and the woman had on oversized sunglasses and a messy ponytail. Neither looked particularly polished, yet Claire's demeanor shifted instantly. "Welcome, Mr. and Mrs. Cartwright." Claire gushed, her voice suddenly honeyed. She didn't bother asking for their tickets or identification. Instead, she gestured for them to enter, her smile growing wider as she held the door open for them. Natasha stood there, invisible yet glaringly obvious in her exclusion. The couple barely glanced at her as they passed, their laughter ringing out as the doors closed behind them. Can you believe what happens next? In just 5 minutes, Natasha turns the tables in a way no one saw coming. Subscribe to Dark Stories to find out how this unfolds. When Claire turned back, her mask of politeness returned. "As I said, ma'am, there's been a mistake. I'm afraid I can't let you in." Natasha felt a wave of humiliation sweep over her, but she pushed it down, refusing to let it show. She glanced at the other travelers in line, who quickly looked away, pretending not to have witnessed the exchange. Taking a steadying breath, she reached for her ticket and ID, tucking them back into her bag with deliberate calm. "I understand," she said evenly, her voice betraying no emotion. She stepped aside, leaving Claire to smirk triumphantly behind her. Outside the lounge, Natasha paused near a row of chairs, her fingers brushing over her phone as she stared into the distance. Memories of other dismissive glances and patronizing tones surfaced in her mind. This wasn't the first time she'd been judged by her appearance, but she had hoped the world had changed more than this. With practiced composure, she unlocked her phone and tapped a number in her favorites. She held it to her ear, waiting for the line to connect. "It's me," she said softly. "I need you to move quickly. Finalize the deal. I want the papers signed within the hour." The voice on the other end responded affirmatively, but Natasha's expression remained unreadable as she ended the call. Sliding her phone back into her pocket, she straightened her posture and glanced back at the lounge's frosted doors. Behind them, she could see Claire laughing with another staff member. Natasha's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. The humiliation still lingered, but it was now laced with something stronger: determination. The wheels of change had already begun to turn. Natasha's heels clicked against the polished marble floors of the terminal as she walked away from the VIP lounge. Each step was measured, purposeful. She found herself near a quiet corner of the airport, away from the bustling crowds and endless announcements. The noise of the terminal softened here, leaving a bubble of calm where she could think. She sat down on a cushioned bench near a large window overlooking the tarmac. Planes taxied in the distance, their engines humming softly. Natasha let her carry-on rest at her feet and clasped her hands together in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her phone buzzed, a faint vibration that broke the stillness. Pulling it from her pocket, she saw the name Elliot flash on the screen. She answered immediately. "It's done," Elliot said without preamble, his voice steady, professional, and tinged with a hint of curiosity. "The paperwork was finalized faster than expected. The board signed off just now. Congratulations, Natasha. You officially own the airline." Natasha exhaled slowly, her gaze still on the planes. "Thank you, Elliot. I'll handle the rest from here." Elliot hesitated. "Are you sure you don't need me to?" "I'm sure," Natasha interrupted gently. "This part is personal." "Understood," he said, his tone respectful. "Call if you need anything." As the line went dead, Natasha lowered the phone and stared at her reflection in the window. The sun caught her dark skin, highlighting the sharp angles of her face and the quiet strength in her eyes. She thought of the years it had taken to get here, the late nights, the endless negotiations, the battles fought in rooms where she was often the only woman, the only black person, the only one underestimated. And yet, here she was. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Excuse me, ma'am, is this seat taken?" Natasha turned to see an elderly woman, her silver hair pinned neatly back, clutching a small shopping bag. She was smiling kindly, her eyes warm but tired. "No, not at all," Natasha replied, gesturing to the empty spot beside her. The woman sat down with a grateful sigh, adjusting her bag on her lap. "Traveling alone?" she asked after a moment. "Yes," Natasha said, offering a polite smile. The woman nodded knowingly. "It's nice to have some quiet before the chaos of boarding, isn't it? I always like to sit here, away from all the rushing around." She glanced out the window, following Natasha's gaze. "The view helps, too." "It does," Natasha agreed, though her mind was elsewhere. The woman seemed to sense Natasha's distraction and didn't press further. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the noise of the terminal feeling distant. Natasha appreciated the pause, the moment of calm before she returned to the fray. When Natasha finally stood, the elderly woman looked up with a smile. "Safe travels, dear." "You too," Natasha replied warmly before walking away. Her steps carried her back toward the VIP lounge, where the frosted glass doors stood like a barrier between her and what she intended to do. She didn't rush. The sound of her heels against the floor was steady, echoing faintly as she approached. Inside, Claire was still at the desk, chatting with another staff member, her laughter floating through the air, light and carefree, as though she had no idea her world was about to change. Natasha stopped just short of the desk, observing quietly. Claire's posture was relaxed, her body language open. She leaned against the counter, gesturing animatedly as she recounted some story to her colleague. It was a stark contrast to the way she had stood earlier, rigid and defensive, when she'd spoken to Natasha. Natasha cleared her throat softly, the sound cutting through the air like a knife. Both Claire and her colleague turned, their smiles fading instantly. "Oh," Claire said, straightening, her voice carrying a note of surprise, though her eyes flickered with something colder. "You're back." Natasha stepped closer, her calm demeanor unshaken. "Yes," she said simply. Claire glanced at the colleague, who quickly excused herself and slipped away. The lounge grew quieter, the buzz of distant conversation now muted. "How can I help you?" Claire asked, her tone still polite but edged with irritation. Natasha tilted her head slightly, studying the woman in front of her. Claire was trying to regain control of the situation, but the slight tremor in her hands betrayed her nerves. "Actually," Natasha began, her voice soft but firm, "I'm here to help you." Claire blinked, confusion flashing across her face. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." Before she could finish, the frosted doors opened, and two men in sharp suits entered. Their presence was commanding, their movements precise. They stopped just behind Natasha, standing like sentinels. Claire's eyes darted between them and Natasha, her confusion deepening. "What's going on?" Natasha reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder. She placed it on the counter and slid it toward Claire. "This," she said evenly, "is a copy of the purchase agreement. As of 30 minutes ago, I am the majority owner of this airline." Claire stared at the folder, her face pale. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came out. Natasha continued, her tone unyielding. "And I believe we need to discuss your behavior toward passengers." Claire's hands trembled as she opened the folder, scanning the pages with wide eyes. When she looked up, Natasha saw something shift in her expression. It wasn't just fear, it was realization. Natasha held her gaze, unblinking. For the first time that day, Claire looked truly small. The silence between Natasha and Claire hung in the air, thick and heavy. The once bustling lounge seemed to shrink, its polished counters and sleek leather chairs fading into the background. Claire's trembling hands lingered on the folder, her lips parting as though she wanted to say something, anything, but words failed her. Natasha stood perfectly still, her gaze unwavering. Her calm demeanor was unnerving, commanding the space without the need for raised voices or dramatics. The two men in suits remained silently behind her, their presence unspoken but undeniable. Finally, Claire found her voice. I don't understand," she stammered, her eyes darting nervously between Natasha and the suited men. "You're saying you own the airline?" Natasha tilted her head slightly, as if considering the question. "I'm not saying it," she replied, her voice measured and cool. "I'm stating it as a fact. As of this morning, I am the majority owner of this airline. And with ownership comes certain privileges." Claire's breath quickened, her chest rising and falling visibly as she tried to process the revelation. Her fingers clutched the edge of the counter, like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. There must be some mistake," Claire stuttered, shaking her head. "This can't be right." Natasha took a slow step forward, the soft click of her heel against the floor cutting through the silence like a metronome. "You're mistaken," Natasha said, her tone unwavering. "The only mistake made today was your treatment of a passenger who, by every standard, qualified for the service you're supposed to provide." Claire's face flushed a deep red, her eyes darting toward the closed lounge doors as though seeking an escape. "I didn't mean," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't mean to what?" Natasha interrupted, her voice sharp yet still controlled. "You didn't mean to humiliate me in front of other passengers? To dismiss me based on your assumptions about who belongs in a space like this?" Claire opened her mouth to respond, but Natasha held up a hand, silencing her. "Let me be clear," Natasha continued, her voice steady. "This isn't just about me. Your behavior reflects poorly on this lounge, on this airline, and on every person who works here. You've not only failed in your duties but exposed this company to liability for discrimination." The suited men behind Natasha stepped forward, placing a single envelope on the counter. Claire flinched, as though the movement itself was a threat. "What's that?" she asked, her voice cracking. Natasha's expression didn't change. "Your termination papers," she said simply. Claire gasped, her hands flying to her chest as though she had been struck. "You're firing me," she whispered, the words heavy with disbelief. "Yes," Natasha said firmly. "Effective immediately. You're relieved of your duties." Security will escort you from the premises. Claire's colleague, who had been watching from the far side of the lounge, took an involuntary step closer, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. Natasha noticed her movement and turned her gaze toward the young woman. Something to add? Natasha asked, her tone neutral but pointed. The woman froze, her eyes flickering between Natasha and Claire. No, she stammered, shrinking back. Natasha gave a small nod, satisfied. Good. Then I suggest you return to your duties and ensure the remaining guests in this lounge are properly attended to. The woman scurried away, her heels clicking hurriedly against the floor. Claire, meanwhile, stood rooted to the spot, her face a mixture of indignation and panic. This isn't fair, she muttered, shaking her head. I've worked here for years. I didn't mean anything by it. You're overreacting. Natasha stepped closer, her voice dropping just enough to make Claire lean in instinctively. Overreacting? Natasha echoed, her tone icy. You think this is an overreaction? Denying a passenger entry to a service they paid for, humiliating them in public, and making derogatory comments isn't just poor judgment. It's unacceptable. Claire's eyes brimmed with tears, though whether they were from remorse or fear was unclear. Please, she whispered, her voice trembling. I need this job. Natasha studied her for a long moment, her face unreadable. And every passenger who walks through those doors needs to be treated with dignity and respect, she said finally. You've shown that you're incapable of providing that. As Natasha turned to leave, Claire's voice rose behind her, desperate and pleading. Wait. Please, Miss Bennett. Natasha paused, her back still to Claire. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes, drawing in a slow, steady breath. Then she turned, her gaze firm but not unkind. This isn't just about me, Natasha said, her voice soft but resonant. It's about every person who's ever been dismissed, underestimated, or made to feel like they don't belong. Actions have consequences, Claire. And today, you're facing yours. With that, Natasha nodded to the suited men, who stepped forward to escort Claire from the lounge. As the frosted glass doors closed behind Claire, Natasha turned her attention to the remaining staff. The room was silent, the air thick with tension. Consider this a wake-up call, Natasha said, addressing them directly. This airline is under new ownership, and with that comes new standards. There will be no tolerance for discrimination, disrespect, or anything less than excellence. Do your jobs well, and you'll have nothing to worry about. The staff exchanged uneasy glances but nodded in agreement. Natasha let the silence linger for a moment before adding, Now, let's ensure the rest of the passengers have the experience they paid for. As she left the lounge, Natasha felt the weight of the encounter lift from her shoulders. The terminal was as bustling as ever, but this time, she walked through it with a renewed sense of purpose. For Natasha, this wasn't just a victory, it was a step toward something bigger, a reminder that power, wielded wisely, could create change, not just for herself, but for everyone who came after her. And as she walked past the lounge's frosted doors for the last time that day, she smiled. This was only the beginning. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the airport terminal as Natasha made her way to a quiet corner overlooking the runway. She wanted a moment of solitude, a chance to process everything that had unfolded. The events of the past hour still lingered in her mind. Claire's trembling hands, the shocked faces of the lounge staff, and the satisfaction of standing up not only for herself but for something larger. Natasha eased into a leather armchair near the panoramic window. The hum of jet engines and the rhythmic announcements over the PA system provided a soothing backdrop. Her fingers traced the edge of her phone, her thoughts swirling. Ownership of the airline wasn't just a power move, it was a responsibility. Her phone buzzed softly, breaking her train of thought. She glanced at the screen, another message from Elliot. All set on my end. HR has started their review of staff. Should I proceed with the media statement? Natasha sighed, her thumb hovering over the screen. She typed a reply, deliberately, her words carefully chosen. Not yet. This isn't about making headlines. Let's focus on the internal changes first. She sent the message and leaned back, her gaze shifting to the runway, where a plane was preparing for takeoff. Watching the plane climb into the sky, Natasha's mind wandered back to her childhood. Her earliest memories were filled with the sounds of airplanes, the distant roar of engines as she sat on her grandmother's porch. Her grandmother, a fiercely independent woman with deep wrinkles etched by years of hard work, had always told her, "Never let anyone tell you where you belong, Natasha. You build your own place." As a little girl, Natasha would watch the planes with wide-eyed wonder, dreaming of the day she could board one herself. But dreams weren't easy to chase when money was tight and opportunities were few. It wasn't until her college years, after scholarships and part-time jobs, that she finally took her first flight. That memory was vivid, walking onto the plane, the hum of the cabin, the thrill of being in the air. But even then, she had felt the weight of judgment. A flight attendant had dismissed her request for water with a curt response, serving others around her with a smile. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but it had stayed with Natasha. Not anymore, she thought, her jaw tightening. I'm in a position now to change things for good. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her back to the present. This time, the caller ID brought a smile to her face. It was Diane, her closest friend and confidant, who had been by her side through every major milestone. Natasha. Diane's warm voice filled her ear. Don't tell me you're at an airport handling business right now. Natasha chuckled softly. Guilty as charged. It's been an eventful day. Oh, I know, Diane replied. Elliot called me earlier. Said you went full boss mode at the airport. I wish I could have seen their faces when you dropped the news. Natasha smiled but shook her head. It's not about that, Diane. This wasn't just about showing my power. It was about making a point. People like Claire need to understand that their actions have real consequences. You've always had a way of turning moments like this into lessons, Diane said, admiration clear in her tone. But don't forget to celebrate the wins, Natasha. This is huge. Natasha's smile softened. You're right. I'll celebrate when the work is done. There's a lot to fix, Diane, policies, training, restructuring. It's going to take time. And if anyone can do it, it's you, Diane said firmly. But promise me you'll at least let yourself enjoy this for a minute. Go sit in your lounge, have a glass of champagne, and soak it all in. Natasha laughed, the sound lightening the weight on her shoulders. I might just do that. As Natasha ended the call, one of the suited men, Robert, the airline's current CEO, approached her. His expression was professional but laced with a hint of nervousness. Miss Bennett, he began, his tone respectful, I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to speak with you about next steps. Natasha gestured for him to sit, her demeanor composed. Go ahead, Robert. He settled into the chair across from her, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. First, let me thank you for handling this situation earlier with such grace. I've already instructed HR to begin reviewing lounge staff protocols and... Natasha held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. This isn't just about protocols, Robert. It's about culture. Changing the rules won't matter if the attitudes behind them stay the same. Robert nodded quickly. I understand, and will ensure that training programs are updated to address these issues, implicit bias, customer service, everything. Good, Natasha said, but training alone won't solve it. I want regular evaluations of staff behavior, anonymous passenger feedback reports, and a clear channel for complaints to be escalated directly to leadership. Consider it done, Robert said, his voice steady but his posture still tense. Natasha studied him for a moment. Tell me something, Robert. How often do you spend time in the field, observing how your employees interact with passengers? Robert hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the floor. Not as often as I should, he admitted. That changes now, Natasha said firmly. Leadership isn't about sitting in a boardroom. It's about understanding what happens on the ground. If you're going to stay on as CEO, I need to know you're committed to that. Robert straightened, a spark of determination in his eyes. You have my word, Miss Bennett. As Robert left, Natasha leaned back in her chair, her gaze returning to the window. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. She had come so far from the little girl on her grandmother's porch, dreaming of airplanes. But she also knew this was just the beginning. With a deep breath, Natasha stood, her shoulders square and her steps confident. The work ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. This wasn't just about running an airline, it was about creating a space where everyone belonged. As she walked toward the lounge, Natasha allowed herself a small smile. Diane was right. It was time to celebrate, if only for a moment. The warm glow of the lounge's interior lighting spilled softly onto the polished floor as Natasha approached the frosted glass doors once again. This time, however, the walk felt different. Her earlier steps had been measured, deliberate, filled with determination and purpose. Now, as she neared the entrance to the VIP lounge, there was a quiet satisfaction in her stride, a sense of belonging that couldn't be questioned, denied, or dismissed. The door slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a room that was now eerily quiet. The clinking of glasses, hushed conversations, and occasional bursts of laughter that had filled the space earlier were gone, replaced by a palpable tension. Staff members moved cautiously, their faces marked with nervous energy as they busied themselves behind the counter or attended to guests. Natasha stepped inside, her presence commanding without the need for words. She paused just beyond the threshold, her eyes sweeping across the room. Though many guests pretended not to notice her, their sideways glances betrayed their curiosity. The staff, however, could not avoid her gaze. Natasha's attention was immediately drawn to a young woman behind the reception desk. Unlike Claire, this employee looked genuinely nervous, her hands fidgeting as she adjusted the nameplate on the counter. It read Emily. Natasha approached the desk slowly, giving Emily enough time to steady herself. "Good evening," Natasha began, her voice calm but firm. Emily straightened immediately, her eyes wide. Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to the VIP lounge. May I see your ticket?" And she stopped abruptly, recognizing Natasha. Her cheeks flushed, and she stammered, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize it was you." Natasha raised an eyebrow, not unkindly. "It's all right, Emily. I appreciate the thoroughness. Please continue as you normally would." Emily hesitated but nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she took Natasha's ticket and scanned it. Natasha waited patiently, observing the young woman's movements. Though nervous, Emily's actions were respectful and professional. When the process was complete, Emily handed back the ticket and said, "Welcome to the lounge, Miss Bennett. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to make your experience more comfortable." "Thank you, Emily," Natasha replied with a small nod. "And don't worry, you're doing just fine." The reassurance brought a flicker of relief to Emily's face, and Natasha walked past the desk, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Inside the lounge, Natasha chose a seat near a corner window, away from the center of attention. She placed her carry-on neatly beside her and leaned back into the plush leather chair, letting herself relax for the first time that day. A server approached her hesitantly, carrying a silver tray with a glass of champagne. "Compliments of the house, ma'am," he said, his voice polite but subdued. Natasha accepted the glass with a slight smile, watching as the server hurried away. She swirled the champagne gently, watching the bubbles rise to the surface. The gesture felt symbolic, small moments of celebration in the midst of a larger transformation. As she sipped the crisp, effervescent drink, Natasha's mind began to wander. She thought about the lounge, its elegant design, and the exclusivity it represented. On the surface, everything appeared polished and pristine, but underneath was a culture that needed reshaping. Her gaze shifted to the other guests, a mix of business travelers and affluent vacationers. Most of them avoided eye contact, their earlier curiosity now replaced with an unspoken discomfort. Natasha could feel the weight of their unasked questions. Who is she? Why is she here? And what does she plan to do? She let the questions hang in the air, unbothered. Change didn't come without discomfort. A few minutes later, Emily approached cautiously, her hands clasped nervously in front of her. "Miss Bennett, may I speak with you for a moment?" Natasha looked up, motioning for Emily to sit in the chair across from her. Of course. What's on your mind? Emily hesitated, her eyes darting to the other staff members, who were carefully avoiding the interaction. I just wanted to say. I know what happened earlier, and she stopped, her voice faltering. Natasha tilted her head, her expression gentle but curious. Go on. Emily took a deep breath. I just want you to know that not all of us are like her, she said quietly, referring to Claire without mentioning her name. Some of us are trying to do the right thing, to treat people the way they deserve to be treated. I don't want you to think we're all like that. Natasha studied the young woman for a moment, her words thoughtful. Thank you for sharing that, Emily. I can see that you care about your work and the way you treat others. That's important. Emily nodded, relief washing over her face. I do. And I think it's amazing what you're doing, taking a stand like this. It gives people like me hope that things can get better. Natasha smiled softly. They can, Emily. But it takes more than one person. It takes a team, a shared commitment to do better. I hope you'll be part of that. Emily's eyes brightened. I will be, ma'am. I promise. As Emily walked away, Natasha felt a renewed sense of purpose. Conversations like that, quiet but meaningful, were the foundation of lasting change. She didn't need grand gestures or public spectacles to make an impact. It was about setting the tone, one interaction at a time. Natasha finished her champagne and stood, gathering her belongings. Before leaving, she approached the reception desk one last time. Emily, she said, her voice steady but warm, I'll be back tomorrow. I want to meet with the entire lounge staff for a discussion about what's next. Make sure everyone's informed. Emily nodded quickly, her expression a mix of nerves and excitement. Of course, Miss Bennett. I'll let them know. Natasha smiled. Good. And Emily, keep up the good work. The young woman beamed, standing a little taller as Natasha walked away. As Natasha exited the lounge and stepped into the bustling terminal, she felt a sense of calm she hadn't experienced in years. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was one she was ready to walk. Looking out at the tarmac one last time before heading toward her gate, Natasha allowed herself a small smile. This wasn't just about owning an airline or proving a point, it was about redefining what spaces like these could be, not just for herself, but for everyone. The next morning, sunlight poured through the expansive glass windows of the airport terminal, bathing everything in a soft, golden glow. The VIP lounge stood quiet and still, its frosted doors guarding the room like sentinels. Inside, staff gathered nervously, exchanging whispers while they adjusted their uniforms and smoothed out non-existent wrinkles. The tension in the air was almost palpable. Natasha arrived exactly at 9 a.m., her heels clicking against the marble floor as she approached. She carried the same air of calm confidence she had the day before, but now her presence felt even more commanding. Dressed in a crisp white blouse and tailored navy slacks, she exuded authority without arrogance. The door slid open as she stepped inside, and every conversation ceased. All eyes turned toward her. Natasha took in the room with a quick but discerning glance, noting the expressions of curiosity, unease, and, in some cases, outright fear. Good morning, she said, her voice clear and composed. I appreciate you all coming in early for this meeting. Her tone wasn't harsh or demanding, but it carried an unspoken weight. The staff knew this wasn't going to be just another routine meeting. Natasha gestured to the chairs scattered around the lounge. Please, take a seat, she said, her voice steady. The staff hesitated, unsure whether to follow her lead or remain standing. Emily, sitting at the reception desk, was the first to move, quickly pulling out a chair and sitting with her back straight. The others followed suit, their movements tentative. Once everyone was seated, Natasha remained standing, her posture relaxed but firm. She clasped her hands in front of her and took a moment to let the silence settle. I know many of you are wondering why we're here, she began, her eyes moving across the room. And I'll address that shortly. But first, I want to start by saying this: what happened yesterday is not something I take lightly. It wasn't just about me being denied entry to this lounge. It was about the culture I observed here, the assumptions that were made, and the way those assumptions impact not just me, but every passenger who walks through these doors. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Some staff members shifted in their seats, their eyes darting toward the floor. I'm not here to single anyone out, Natasha continued, her voice firm but not accusatory. But I am here to make one thing very clear: this lounge, and this airline as a whole, will no longer tolerate discrimination, disrespect, or poor treatment of any kind. Her words hung in the air like a challenge, and she let the silence stretch just long enough to make an impact. Natasha moved closer to the group, her tone softening slightly. I know change isn't easy. I know many of you may be feeling uneasy right now, wondering what this means for you and your roles here. So let me be transparent: my goal is not to punish. My goal is to create an environment where everyone, staff and passengers alike, feels valued and respected. She paused, giving them time to absorb her words. But in order to do that, I need your commitment. This isn't something I can achieve alone. Emily raised her hand hesitantly, her face a mix of nerves and determination. Natasha nodded for her to speak. I just wanted to say that I think this is a good thing, Emily said, her voice trembling slightly. Sometimes it feels like we're expected to just follow orders and not question anything, even when something feels wrong. It's refreshing to hear someone talk about making things better for everyone. Natasha smiled warmly. Thank you, Emily. Your honesty is appreciated, and you're absolutely right. Creating a culture of respect starts with empowering people to speak up when they see something that doesn't align with our values. Her gaze shifted back to the group. That's why one of the first changes I'm implementing is a feedback system. It will allow both staff and passengers to report issues, whether it's about mistreatment, unfair practices, or even suggestions for improvement. Every report will be taken seriously and reviewed by leadership. No more sweeping things under the rug. A few staff members nodded, their expressions softening. Natasha could see the beginnings of trust forming, though she knew there was still work to be done. Natasha took a step closer to the team, her voice becoming more conversational. I want to share something with you all, she said. Growing up, I didn't come from wealth or privilege. My grandmother raised me, and she taught me the value of hard work, kindness, and integrity. But even when I achieved success, I was often met with assumptions about who I was, or, more importantly, who people thought I wasn't. She paused, letting her words sink in. I'd been in your shoes, working hard, following the rules, trying to do my best in an environment that didn't always make it easy. That's why I'm here today, not just as the owner of this airline, but as someone who understands how much pride you take in your work. Her words seemed to resonate. A few staff members exchanged glances, their shoulders relaxing slightly. Natasha straightened, her tone becoming more resolute. That being said, pride in your work must also come with accountability. Moving forward, there will be mandatory training sessions for every member of this lounge's staff, training that focuses on cultural sensitivity, bias awareness, and excellence in customer service. This isn't optional, and it's not just a box to check. It's an investment in you, in this airline, and in the passengers we serve. She met the eyes of each staff member in turn. I want to be clear, this isn't about punishment or assigning blame. It's about building a foundation we can all be proud of. But let me also be clear, those who choose not to align with these values will no longer have a place here. Her words were firm, but her expression remained compassionate. As the meeting drew to a close, Natasha addressed the room one last time. Change doesn't happen albicans, and I don't expect perfection. But what I do expect is effort, honesty, and a willingness to grow. If we can commit to that, I truly believe we can create something extraordinary. She glanced around the room, noticing how the tension had eased. There were still questions in their eyes, but there was also something else: hope. Thank you all for your time, Natasha said, her voice steady. This is just the beginning, but I'm looking forward to working with each of you to make this lounge, and this airline, something we can all take pride in. As she turned to leave, Emily stood up, her voice clear and strong. Thank you, Miss Bennett. The other staff members nodded in agreement, murmuring their thanks. Natasha smiled. It was a small victory, but an important one. Change had begun. The weeks following Natasha's meeting with the lounge staff were a whirlwind of activity. The new owner's presence rippled through the airline, from the plush VIP lounges to the noisy tarmac. Natasha spent long hours reviewing policies, meeting with employees, and carefully implementing the changes she had envisioned. For many, her leadership style was an adjustment. Natasha wasn't content to sit in her office and delegate. She was often on the ground, listening to employees' concerns, asking passengers about their experiences, and ensuring that every corner of the airline reflected her commitment to excellence and inclusivity. But not everyone was quick to adapt. Resistance lingered in certain corners, grumblings from employees unwilling to embrace change, subtle pushback from mid-level managers clinging to outdated practices. Natasha addressed each challenge with the same calm determination she had shown in the lounge. One morning, Robert, the airline's CEO, approached Natasha in her office, holding a stack of reports. His face was lined with worry. "We're seeing some backlash from staff," he admitted, setting the reports on her desk. "Some are claiming the new training programs are too demanding, and a few senior employees have even threatened to resign." Natasha leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled. "Change is never easy, Robert, but that doesn't mean we abandon our principles." Robert hesitated. "What if it affects morale? Or worse, our bottom line?" Natasha met his gaze, her voice steady. "Morale isn't built by letting bad behavior slide. And as for the bottom line, respect, excellence, and inclusivity aren't just ethical choices, they're good business. Passengers notice when they're treated well. Loyalty comes from trust." Robert nodded slowly. "Understood." Over the following months, Natasha's vision began to take root. Employees who initially resisted the changes found themselves impressed by the results. The training programs weren't just about cultural sensitivity, they also focused on professional growth, giving staff the tools to excel in their roles. Emily, the nervous receptionist Natasha had first encountered, blossomed under the new system. Her confidence grew, and she was soon promoted to a supervisory role, overseeing the very lounge where Natasha had faced discrimination. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you," Emily told Natasha during a chance meeting in the terminal. "You made it this far because you earned it," Natasha replied with a smile. Passengers, too, began to notice the difference. The lounge's atmosphere shifted from one of exclusivity to one of genuine warmth and professionalism. Complaints about staff behavior dwindled, replaced by glowing reviews. One afternoon, Natasha was visiting the VIP lounge when she spotted a familiar figure near the counter, Claire. Natasha's initial reaction was surprise. Claire was dressed in civilian clothes, standing awkwardly at the reception desk as Emily spoke to her with a professional but distant tone. Curious, Natasha approached. "Miss Bennett," Claire said, her voice tinged with nervousness. "I didn't expect to see you here." Natasha regarded her calmly. "Claire, what brings you back to the lounge?" Claire hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. I wanted to apologize. For how I treated you that day." Natasha folded her arms, waiting. Claire continued, her voice faltering. "I was wrong. I made assumptions about you, about your place here. Losing my job forced me to look at myself and the way I treated others. I know I can't undo what I did, but I wanted to say I'm sorry." Natasha studied her for a moment, considering the sincerity in her voice. "Growth begins with acknowledgement," she said finally. "What you do with that acknowledgement is up to you." Claire nodded, her expression a mix of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly before leaving the lounge. By the end of Natasha's first year as owner, the airline was thriving. Revenue had increased as more passengers praised the improved service and culture. Employee satisfaction scores rose, reflecting the success of Natasha's changes. One evening, during an annual company event, Natasha stood before a room filled with employees from every level of the airline. She looked out at the diverse crowd, seeing faces filled with pride, hope, and determination. "When I took over this airline," Natasha began, her voice resonating through the room, "I didn't just want to run a business. I wanted to create something meaningful, something that reflected the values we should all strive for: respect, integrity, and excellence." She paused, letting her words sink in. "This success isn't mine alone. It belongs to every one of you who believed in the vision, who chose to embrace change, and who worked to make this airline a place we can all be proud of. The room erupted into applause, but Natasha raised her hand to quiet them. Our work isn't done, she said, but if we continue to move forward together, there's no limit to what we can achieve. And so, a single moment of prejudice turned into a powerful story of transformation. Natasha didn't just change the airline, she proved that dignity and respect can redefine everything. If this story inspired you, make sure to hit that subscribe button for dark stories for more tales that challenge, empower, and captivate. Don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.